it's Fantasy Morphe here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to draw your basic manga girl. What I'm going to start with is by actually getting out a pencil, my random pouch of stuff. What we're going to do is we're going to start with the head. I usually start with the head in order to get proportions correct. So you do your basic circle. Everyone should know what a circle is. If you don't, you're probably a preschooler and you should not be on YouTube by yourself. Go find a parent. So what I'm going to do is the basic shape of the head. This is all up to opinion on how you want to do it, but you will just draw basic to get it started. You will draw a line here, then draw it to meet somewhere near the middle of the circle. And then you will take it and you will start filling it out, making it more rounded and more human shaped versus this triangle creature. This can take, I'm very perfectionist about how I do things, so this may take a little bit longer than you would. So we've got a cutesy little head. Now to get the proportions correct, you can be as specific or as loose as you want with this. But when you're getting started, it can sometimes be easier to have a ruler. So what I will do is I will measure the head, get a basic idea. So that's about 3 or 4 centimeters. I think that's 3. So you'll take the 3 centimeter, then you will move it down, and you will try to get about 5 to 6 heads for a female length. But this is just a guiding line. It can really be as tall or as short as you want it. This just helps you get your proportions better. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Obviously the first one's the head. 5 and 6. Now, what I do is I usually just work from the top down. So I will start adding the neck here. You want to put this about midway between the end of the jaw and the chin, so as to not give them a bobblehead look or some really fat neck. So, sketching. You're going to want to start with your basic character outline first. A lot of people do skeletons, but I find that they mess up my line work, so unless I'm doing a specific pose, I'm just going to do a quick shoulders. And I will really raise this up to like 100 times, it feels like, if I don't like it. So don't be afraid of how bad it looks in the beginning. But what you want is for your, you take the width of your head, and you want it about from the edge of the head to another half a head. So if you're going to be really precise about this, you're going to want it about, mine's a little bit bigger, probably did the shoulders too broad, but I can change in an instant, see? Just take it and shorten the length a little bit. It's amazing how much just a tiny bit can change the entire look of your picture. See? You got shoulders. Since this is pencil work and I will be inking this later, it can be as loose or as exact as I want. Now this first line you have here is usually going to be about mid-chest. So you're going to want to start drawing the basic outline of the human form, going in for her hips, or not her hips, her waist. It can be as thin, as thick, really depends on the character. So this is just the rib cage, going in slightly. It can be as defined as you want. And then you're going to start coming back out for the hips. I find that that's about where your second line should be. Now the rest of your 3 lines are going to sometimes be your legs, sometimes you're going to make them a little bit shorter than these lines I've done. I usually make my legs a little bit longer than they should be because I find that they look a little bit better with longer legs versus a long torso. Just an opinion about the human figure. I find mine look kind of awkward when their legs are too short, and so I'd rather go too long than too short. So you're going to want to keep going. You don't want to stop the going out for a little while into the leg because the human body does not just cut off into a leg. So the leg's going to start receding in to the about, actually it's supposed to be higher than that, I'm sorry. Little bit in. The knee should be about a little bit higher than this line to make them look accurate. You know, I've made this character a weird shape, but I will fix it in a minute. So about here, I think, should be your knee, because you want it to be about equal length between your thigh and your calf. So about here. That'll leave room for her feet to be incorporated in the height. Then you come back up, make a small definition for the knee, and just go straight up. And you just continue with the other leg. Simple as that. Drawing down, drawing the other leg out, making the shape of the leg. Now obviously the second one is not quite accurate with the first. This always happens with me. I will just do a little bit of editing to make it look more like a leg. Because legs have a shape to them. As it can be almost inconceivable, but it can be also really well done. I've made this too large because compared to this other side. So we'll just fix that right up. And then you have the basic form for the torso and legs. Now, I have trouble with feet, but everybody has their own problem. Yours might be hands, but I find it better to work on it and make it as bad as you do, but don't stop trying to hide it. Don't start trying to hide it. Meaning, even if you draw really bad hands or something, don't just not draw hands. Because you're not going to grow as an artist that way. I find front feet are the hardest to do. Like if you got an angle to the feet, then I can make them look pretty decent. But getting that right front on foot looks really awkward for me. Look at this. This is a monstrosity, but it's better to practice it than to not have anything. Because if the person doesn't have feet, they would not be standing right now. And usually feet would have a better angle than this, and I do not know how to draw toes correctly. So it just looks like this. You can draw feet however you want. I'm sure you can do 100 times better than me. I am not a professional in any way. Just playing in the camera and drawing pictures. That looks awful. Well, I'll try to repair it a little bit, but it's pretty much ruined. As good as it's going to get. I can't draw feet. So now what you're going to do is you're going to get your arms. I'm going to do a basic hand on hip, arm straight down. So I'm going to edit this shoulder so that the arm is coming out, because a hand on your hip is going to have some leeway in the shoulder, otherwise it does not make sense. If your arm is straight down, your hand's going to end up somewhere on the other side. These are just basic anatomy facts you're going to have to figure out as you go along. So I'm going to shoulder here. You might want to add some definition to the shoulder. It's all up in you. Because the muscle here is tensed. So you'll draw out. And you want to keep it approximately in length with your waist. So what you'll do is either, I don't have a compass, so I make an imaginary line that would approximately be my compass to figure out the point that it's at. And I honestly think it should be a little bit longer. Now, that's in order. Now we finish the arm, adding the armpit area and drawing down into the elbow, adding enough definition to the elbow so that we can tell it is bent. A line here. And I've actually probably made this too far out. So I'll have to just re-edit it. That's why it's simple to change things when you're in the beginning stages. And you don't ever want to think that people don't erase their stuff. I have never seen anybody, professional or not, who can do that and make it look exactly right unless they've done the same pose 100 times over. So it's a lighter curve here. And so the hand's going to end about here. So you want it to be slightly, since it is at an angle, you want it to be slightly higher than the waist. Arm definition, because I don't draw skinny, fake arms. And it can be a style thing. A lot of people draw really tiny arms, and I'm like, how can you hold anything? And it's like really funny. So I'm going to draw in a hand. Upper finger. Okay. I don't really know how to give you tips on this. I might do a hand video later. But I find that the hands are the hardest part. Well, like the feet for me. I've been working my hands a lot longer. but to get them in different positions can be difficult. Like, I find it easier to do the rest of the drawing versus the hand. So the hand will split here, and the pinky will come down here. Now I've done that a weird, so I'm going to stop that. Place this line here. And a couple lines here to show the crease in the wrist. I will fix that up later. The other hand's just going to be your basic coming down and elbow. You want some definition, but it's hard to get right. Keep coming. And since this one is not as bent, it's going to come down lower. About that looks right. I'm going to draw another hand. And the thumb. Add some fingers to the back, and they'll be coming around the front. Not around the front, around the back. And that gives you a basic hand. Now, the hardest thing I find is to get the palm size correct. Because I find that I usually end up too big, too small, and they don't look quite right. Fingers, once you get them, they're done. But here it is so far. Basic character outline. Now what you're going to do is you're probably going to add some clothes. Since this is not a clothing video, I'm just going to add the basic lines for a t-shirt. Like, add some sleeves, wrinkle, puff, there. Add some wrinkle here because that's the shoulder joint. Make sure the line goes slightly above the skin. This one's slightly shorter since the arm is bent. Ow. Now, I don't do clothing very well. Okay, and one thing you can do here is you can define the figure better. So, if the girl is fairly small-chested, we'll just add a little bit of a dent here, so that it's not just a flat board. You want the human to have some figure if she's over. I think I'm drawing someone who's around 16 to 18. We don't want her to have no figure. So since we've already drawn the human figure, and it's going to be a tight t-shirt. So what you're going to do is make some basic lines for clothing, because it'll obviously have some pull and tug. About here for the hemline. There. And that'll give you your basic t-shirt. Now for shorts, they can go about mid-calf. I find I don't really pay attention to my clothing much. I more or less just draw fabric folds and stuff. So here, get your basic short and shorts. Now the main portion is going to be your face, I think. But I never want to start on the face, because if I have a really good face, I don't want to ruin it with the body, because I don't do bodies as well, usually. Although probably since I'm videoing this, this is going to be the worst face ever. So you're going to do your basic middle line. And depending on your angle you're drawing at, this is going to change. Like for instance, this is going to be a straight on line, but if I were doing a girl at, say, a 3/4 angle, we do this. I would draw the facial line. And you would kind of follow the curve of the face more. And the nose would obviously like start here and go out to the nose point. And I find it easier to find the curve of the nose when you do that, when it just seems to flow with the face. You can always erase the extra. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to try to make just basic eyes, make them as symmetrical as I can. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, so I usually redraw eyes 100 times, but I'm going to try to keep them as simple as possible so that I don't do that. Pretty basic. Fairly even. Okay, so then we add the second bottom line. I've made them fairly large in this illustration. So then you're going to add the inner circle for the iris. Iris on the other side. Keep them about the same size. You want to keep it as symmetrical as possible, because human faces are fairly symmetrical but not exact. So it can be off a little bit. Then Before I add the details in the eyes, I will usually add the nose and mouth because I want to keep the face balanced. If I don't think that the eyes match up, I don't want to have to redraw all that. So how I draw noses is a very simple line. I do slightly up, down, and up again. I try to define the nostrils. A lot of people will just make a small line like this, or under the nose, or these don't even look like noses here, but it would make sense on a face. Then you just draw the face, mouth. I'm going to make her side grinning. I find emotions are harder to convey correctly because I want her to be slightly happy. Like, yay! And for add detail on the nose, I will put a line about here because that's where your face is going to start going into your brow bone. So usually an eye will have a slight line above it for the eyelid. And then you'll have your eyebrows slightly above that. So slightly thicker. You have an arch to them and then come back down. So on the other side. And you have two eyebrows. Eyebrows are not as symmetrical. Eyebrows can be very different depending on your style, especially with facial expressions. So now I'm going to add detail in the eye. You're going to start with your highlights so that you don't color them in. I usually add about 2. Some people add 3, 4. So I do one in the upper side and one on the lower side, depending on the light source. So we're going to say that the light source is coming from here. So the bigger one is obviously going to be towards the light source. Then you're going to add the pupil. I usually do my pupils really big because I find they look cuter. Now we're going to add hair. And so I'm going to add some basic bangs. So I find it easier to do this motion with my hand. So I'll do a focal bang, and then I'll build the rest around it. Like I'll build it slightly under, and then under again, and maybe one on top of that one. Try to keep them in line. And you don't want them all going exactly one way because it feels weird, so you might want to get it slightly off, and then one under it. And I've done all these too much the same direction, so I'm going to restart them. And then you're going to have one that's coming up and over. And like natural hair is not stationary. So those are her bangs. Now obviously, because the bangs I've done, she looks kind of like a boy. So we're going to, because I don't do enough detail in the face to make them look really girly. This could be a girl or a boy at this point. Honestly, I don't do enough definition. So you're going to want to add some sort of hairstyle. Now it can be, let's say, about here. Usually, they do some definition for the ears because humans have ears. And you have your basic character outline. Obviously, it's not very attractive, but it is done. So what I will do now is I will take out my ink pen, and I will ink over this because we're doing manga, not anime, so I'm not going to color it. Manga is usually done in ink. Grab me my ink. That was a pencil sharpener attack. I take too long to do everything, don't I? Put that down and dip it in the ink. Now this is something I am not as skilled at. I just got these pens very recently. So I will start in one top left corner because I'm right-handed. So I find it easier to go from top left to bottom right. Because if you start over here, you're going to end up going over it with your hands subconsciously a lot. So scratch, scratch, line, break it up just a little bit more than I had it so that it's more natural and not such a shape. About there. And then we're going to add in the facial structure. I've given her face way too much roundness. So, and this is one thing that happens. It does not become symmetrical when you ink, and it can really ruin it. So what I could do is I could white this out later if I wanted to, or fix it up. So now we're going to ink in the bangs there. I try to build them up because hair is weird. It's a really weird thing. Obviously, since there is a gap in between these two bangs, I will add the eyebrow. I won't usually add eyebrows in places there are bangs, so I will not be adding any of this eyebrow. Add a slight line here, there, here. Sorry, in this eye. Doop. Line. Usually people will change out for a Madu pen or a mapping pen for the facial details, but I find it just as easy to go in with the G pen, since I'm not so precise with my work. I do a little bit more shonen than shoujo. Shoujo, the hair would be a lot more detailed. Fill in the iris. Now, a lot of times you will use screen toning for the coloring of the eyes, but since I don't have a job and can't afford screen tone, what I will do is I will add my own little lines to them. So I will start in the top and I will just follow the line that your eyes would normally take. And that's how I shade the top half. And then the bottom might have one or two lines, but it's going to be pretty much white. Then you're going to draw in your nose, which should honestly be a little bit higher, so I'm going to do that now. Face up. And now the head's drawn. I'm going to draw in the neck. Now a lot of this you'll find you'll change as you go along. Like I didn't like exactly how the neck was, so I did it in a little bit more, changed up some of the hair structure, and it's okay. I mean, if you're not doing this professionally yet, you can keep everything how exactly you want it. If you're doing this for a job or something, you might want to focus more on how your clientele would want it. If you know, like if you're doing this for a commissioned object, you're going to want to keep in style with things that they like. But since I don't know your audience, I can't tell you anything more than that. And I did that wrong because I did exactly what I told you not to, and I went from the right side to the left side. So now I have to be extra cautious, and I'll just turn my page so I don't touch it. Oh, I have a stack of paper. I forgot about that. Lines for sleeves. Exactly what I told you not to do. And I find that a lot of manga I've seen, they will make the outer lines of the character thicker than the inner lines. I don't know if that's to stand out against the background or not. I'm not professional, so I don't know what the point of that is. But I find that happens a lot. So it's just a tip for you out there to hear. Why am I singing? That happens sometimes. And I get nervous, because I am very nervous right now. I have honestly made her waist probably way too thin, but it's okay. It's manga. It's not exactly correct to human anatomy. So the elbow would be jointed here. Honestly, I think I've made her arm too long, so I'll have to shorten that too. Okay, so you got your basic arm. And since I draw this one hand type so much, I can probably do it without penciling it in again. So let's see. Joint, finger. Oh, I hope I don't ruin this. Thumb. Yeah, okay. Not as bad as I was worried about. Well lined. Not too bad. Finger's way too short, but I can wipe that out. Add a little bit of the shirt here. The shirts do not end in a straight line. I've been quiet for way too long here. I'm just gonna keep going. And you go like these. If you do a crease in the wrist, you want to make it really tiny as you can because it's not going to be that big a deal. Continue the shorts. I try to follow the lines I've done to make the ankles and clothing and such, but it can be really hard sometimes. Knee. I made these legs bend out at an odd angle. These are kind of things I see as I'm going along. I usually don't make the outlines. I started in the beginning because I find I do better just drawing this figure straight out and editing as I go, like I'm doing right now. I am not doing pretty line work. Add a little bit of ankle definition, make the joint, pull the foot out. My terrible feet. And see, I've edited it through the entire thing, so it's really just trial and error as you go along. Till you find what you like. I sound like an idiot. Yeah, that's right, round toes. I almost added an extra one there. I think we are done with her inking. So I will grab a tissue to clean up my pen. And I will be washing this in a minute. I'm not just leaving it full of ink. So you'll give that a minute to dry so that when you erase the pencil lines, it doesn't completely smear all your ink work, because I have done that and it is not fun. See all that nasty ink that's still in there? I'll have to clean that out more later. But I'm not going to leave it too long, so it's going to go right after I record this. I probably sound like I'm half asleep right now. I didn't realize my voice was doing that. Where'd my eraser go? There you are. So, what I'll do is I'll make sure I have a clean finger, and I'll just test the last thing I inked to make sure it's completely dry. So you want to just tap it, don't smudge or anything. That's still slightly wet, so I can still start erasing up here. Now, since I do this completely in ink, there is very little to no shading, because if I were to do shading lines, I want to do them in the main points that it's going to be. Since this is not a very dark drawing and there's no real specific light source, I've given a general one for if you want to add more shading. But I think since I'm not using screen tones, the lines are just going to make this look sloppy at this point. Now usually I would use a brush to get rid of the pencil lead, but since I have lost my brush, I'm just going to shake it out on the floor. I will sweep that later. And there you go. Your basic manga girl, I guess. Clean up the lines a little bit, make sure everything's dusted off, and that's pretty much it. I can give more specific tips if anybody actually watches this, but I think I'm done. Bye.